I hate to make a confession, but it's church, okay? We're supposed to make confessions in church, right? This is going to surprise some of you. I love Aerosmith. I do. I love Aerosmith. And I really like one of their songs called It's Amazing. I like it so much I've titled the sermon today Amazing. And really, if you think about it, this is almost a religious song, a Christian song. I kept the right ones out and let the wrong ones in. Had an angel of mercy to see me through all my sins. There were times in my life when I was going insane, trying to walk through the pain, when I lost my grip and I hit the floor. Yeah, I thought I could leave but couldn't get out the door. I was so sick and tired of living a lie, I was wishing that I would die. It's amazing. With the blink of an eye, you finally see the light. It's amazing. When the moment arrives that you'll know you'll be all right, it's amazing. And I'm saying a prayer for the desperate hearts tonight, and you don't know how hard it was for me to not sing that in key. I thought seriously about it. I did think seriously about singing it. But the truth is, there are some things that the Bible says are amazing. There are some things in the ministry and the life of Jesus that the text says is amazing. It truly is amazing. And it begins with, one of the passages about him being amazing begins with a terrible, terrible misjudgment. One of the biggest misjudgments of all time. Now, there have been a lot of bad misjudgments. For instance, Edwin L. Drake said in 1859, "Drill for oil? You mean drill into the ground to try and find oil? You're crazy." I assume he didn't make much money. William Orton said, "What use could this company make of an electric toy?" Talking about the telephone. Thomas Watson, the chairman of IBM in 1943, said, "I think there's a world for maybe 5 computers." Oh yeah? How many of you have 5 computers or more in your home right now? Just your home. Regarding the Beatles, a record executive said, "We don't like their sound and guitar music is on the way out," in 1962. And then Ken Olsen, the founder of Digital Equipment, said there's no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. But one of my favorites is Elvis Presley was told by a music executive, "Stick to driving a truck, son, because you'll never make it as a singer." Those are some bad misjudgments. But the greatest example of misjudgment happened in the ministry of Jesus. After his great miracle tour, where he has been healing people and performing all kinds of miracles, a quartet of amazing miracles to be precise before our text in Mark 6, he returned home to Nazareth, to his home synagogue. All right? He's been on a preaching, healing tour. And now he comes back home for a few days. I know a little bit what that's like. That's my home church. In the mid to late 1980s, I was invited back there to preach on a homecoming service. Some of the people looked at me in amazement. They could not believe that this child, who all they had really hoped for was he wouldn't be in jail, was now preaching. And it was a blessed experience. It was a wonderful experience. I saw all the men and women who had taught me in Sunday school and helped raise me, literally helped raise me, took a church village to help raise me. And I saw it as just a wonderful experience. Well, that is not what happened to Jesus. Not what happened to Jesus at all. He didn't get that kind of reception in his homecoming. You would imagine that when he came back to Nazareth, they would have heard all about him and they would have treated him like a hero. But they didn't. In fact, they treated him like a zero. Jesus left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. The next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. And they asked, "Where did he get all this wisdom and power to perform such miracles?" And then they scoffed. "He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James Joseph, Judas, and Simon. His sisters live right here among us. And they were deeply offended. And you wonder, were they deeply offended because they didn't believe, or were they deeply offended because they were jealous? I just wonder sometimes. And they refused to believe in him. And then Jesus told them, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his own family. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. He was amazed at their unbelief. It was amazing to Jesus. The word amaze or amazing appears frequently in the New Testament. In every case but twice, the word is used to describe how other people responded to seeing the work of Jesus, the mighty works of God. But in two occasions, we're going to look at both of them today, Jesus is the one who is amazed. I suspected that as God, he was incapable of being amazed, that he was unamazable. Is that a word? I would have expected that he was unamazable, if that is truly a word. But there are two times in the New Testament where we read that Jesus was amazed. So what amazes Jesus? What causes Jesus to stop and say, it's amazing? Let's see. First, in our text, he was amazed at their unbelief. The people started asking a lot of questions about Jesus. Where did this man get the ability to do these things? Isn't this the carpenter? I mean, he should have been the object of their utter adoration, but instead he was the target of their accusations. And they treated him like he was a fraud. They weren't looking for answers, they were looking for accusations. By the way, that has always been a favorite tactic of Satan, to use questions to test people. You see, a crooked Satan will always use a crooked question mark to challenge what a Christian believes. The devil is a crook himself, so he always puts a crooked question mark where God has placed an exclamation point. For example, in the Garden of Eden, God had spoken clearly. He had told Adam and Eve they could eat all of the trees of the garden, but if they ate fruit from just one tree, they would die. Period. Exclamation point. And Satan slithered into Eve's presence and asked a question. Did God really say that if you ate from the fruit of this tree, you would die? That's what he asked. Is that what he asked? That wasn't what God said at all. But Satan put a question mark around it and got Eve to wondering. And that's when Satan slipped in the lie. You won't die at all. In fact, God doesn't want you to do that because he knows you will be like God. Nothing wrong with asking questions about God in the Bible. Just always be aware that Satan is ready to slip a question mark in one ear and a lie in the other. Be aware of that. So members of the synagogue here back in Jesus' hometown of Nazareth were scandalized that this man who had grown up in the middle of them claimed to be anything other than a carpenter or the son of Mary. The practical truth is, Jesus knew from the very beginning of his ministry what it was like to be rejected. All of us have had feelings of rejections. You remember Hebrews 4 says he is a man just like us. tempted in every way such as we are, yet without sin. He knew immediately what it was like to be rejected from the very beginning of his ministry. We've all felt it. I remember when I sent my first manuscript out for my first book, I got 3 rejection letters in a row before I got a positive. You could quit when you're getting no, 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 no. Maybe you applied for a job and didn't get it. Maybe there was someone you thought you loved and might marry, but they didn't feel the same way. It didn't work out. Rejection can be horribly painful. Maybe your spouse, you were already married, and your spouse decided they didn't want to be married anymore. Jesus understands your pain. Jesus understands the feelings and the emotions of rejection because he was despised and rejected. A man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. They said, "Isn't this man the carpenter?" Now, Jesus was more than a carpenter. But isn't this man just the carpenter that grew up around us? And he was a carpenter until age 30, the beginning of his ministry. The word literally means a craftsman, a jack of all trades who could build or fix anything. I've known some men like that. I know some men like that here in our congregation. Not many, I'm telling you. But I do know some men like that in our congregation. If there is a plumbing problem, they don't call the plumber like I do, they fix it. If there's an electrical problem, they don't call an electrician like I do, they fix it. If there's a door or a window that needs to be replaced, they replace it. Ladies, are you married to a man like that? I see almost all of you shaking your head. I can see from the reaction of most of you that you aren't. I can see one that has literally fallen out of the seat over here, and her name is Diane. But Jesus, the master carpenter, is still fixing things. He fixes broken hearts. He fixes broken homes. We'll see the story of that in The Blind. He fixes broken hopes. Jesus is the only person in history who claimed to be able to completely heal a broken heart. If we'll just let him. Will you offer him your broken heart, your broken home, your broken hopes? You got to give him all the broken pieces before he can put them back together again. You know, a good carpenter can look at a stack of lumber and a set of plans and can envision the finished product. Some of you are like that. When I look at a stack of lumber and a splinter, all I see is splinters, bent nails, and a hammer on my thumb, and then something I'm going to have to move to somewhere else and be embarrassed that I can't do anything with it. Jesus looks at you and me and sees what he can build, what he can construct and conform to his image. See, if you need something fixed today, the master carpenter is taking divine appointments, I'll tell you that much. That's the reason he came, to seek and to save the lost. But here's something interesting. The Bible said in our text, he could not do any miracles there. Isn't the power of God unlimited? He could not do any miracles there. Isn't God omnipotent, all-powerful? He could not do any miracles there. So what happened? Why couldn't he do miracles there? It was because of their lack of faith. Yes, God is all-powerful. Yes, God is omnipotent. But there's only one area in the universe where God has voluntarily chosen to limit his omnipotence, and it's in the area of your will. He won't force you to believe. He won't make you believe. And that's the beauty of the Christian faith, is it's all by free will choice. He won't force his power on you. He offers you eternal salvation He promises it to you. He promises you grace and mercy and forgiveness and love without measure, but he won't make you take it. He won't force you to it. And so the citizens of Nazareth were not able to see what the other villages had seen in Jesus. These Nazareth citizens mistook that Jesus was just a carpenter. They believed he could build a table, but he couldn't build a life. They were just too familiar with him. Have you ever heard the saying, familiarity breeds contempt? Yeah, I've heard that a lot. But it's not really true unless you're talking about contemptible people. Seriously, familiarity can breed contempt if it's contemptible people. Almost everybody in this room, I assume, has had that experience. But not if it's not contemptible. I'm very, very familiar with my wife, and familiarity does not breed contempt with her. I want her around every opportunity she can possibly be. Can't say this vice versa is true, but anyway, I do. I don't think so much that it's familiarity breeds contempt as it is familiarity breeds indifference. They had watched Jesus grow up, and there was nothing special about him. He just had these brothers, his sisters still living there among them. He was just a carpenter, they said. There was nothing special about him. They just could not, they were so familiar with him that they just could not believe that there was anything special about him. Familiarity bred contempt. I've read that the people who live right around Niagara Falls never even hear the falls. After years of living there, they never hear the falls. That they will drive right by them on their way to work or to the store or to church and to school, and they don't see the falls, and they never hear the falls. Well, I'm telling you, I've been to Niagara Falls. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. I could truly say about it, it's amazing. But the people who live right around it, familiarity, they don't notice it. When my kids were in high school at ECS, they used to play basketball and baseball games down where's Jack Johnson? Jack at Everglades City. And back in those days in the 90s, Everglades City had a sewage plant right near the school, the high school. I don't know, they may still. And it was the awfulest smell. I'm telling you, I can't imagine I can't describe how bad it was. You would get it out of your car and you'd run into the gym to try to get away from that smell. It was that bad. And one day I was walking out of the gym and I asked one of the locals, one of the Everglades City fans that I'd had some conversations with, I said, how do y'all get used to that? Does it always smell like this here? And he said, smell like what? You just get used to things. In that sense, familiarity breeds contempt or indifference. Listen, when it comes to the things of the Lord, we have to be careful about the danger of familiarity. When was the last time you experienced the life-changing power of God in your life? It's so easy to just get in a rut and come to church and sing the songs and take communion and listen to the lesson and say hey to a few people and leave without ever even thinking God Almighty was there. In that sense, familiarity breeds contempt, and you're limiting the flow of God's power in your life when you're indifferent to it. So, Mark 6, unbelief amazes Jesus. That's the negative aspect of the topic. But then comes a story of incredible faith where faith amazes Jesus. When Jesus had finished saying this to all the people, he returned to Capernaum, and at that time the highly valued slave of a Roman officer was sick and near death. When the officer heard about Jesus, he sent some respected Jewish elders to ask him to come and heal his slaves. And they earnestly begged Jesus to help the man. If anyone deserves your help, he does, they said. He loves the Jewish people and even built a synagogue. This is a Roman centurion now. It's not a Jew, this is a Roman centurion. He loves the Jewish people and even built a synagogue for us. And so Jesus went with them. But just before they arrived at the house, the officer sent some friends to say, Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home, for I am not worthy of such an honor. I am not worthy to even come out and meet you. Just say the word from where you are. His own hometown. Wouldn't believe him when he was right there among them. And now this Roman centurion, his own hometown of Jews. And now this Roman centurion says, just say the word from where you are, and the servant will be healed. And I know this because I am under the authority of my superior officers, and I have authority over my soldiers, and I only need to say go, and they go, or come, and they come. And if I say to my slaves, do this, they do it. And when Jesus heard this, he was what? Let's try that again. And when Jesus heard this, he was what? And turning to the crowd that was following him, he said, I tell you, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And when the officer's friends returned to his house, they found the slave completely healed. Wow. So it's amazing in two different directions. We don't want to be like those people in Nazareth who their unbelief was amazing. We want to be like this Roman soldier who demonstrated a dynamic faith that amazed Jesus. One reason that Jesus was amazed is because this was a Gentile. This was a Roman soldier, a centurion, which meant he was a soldier responsible for at least 100 men, probably more. And he himself was under the authority of commanding officers. And he recognized that Jesus was under the authority of his heavenly Father and had authority over disease and death. And all he had to do was give the command, and disease would be gone and death would be avoided. That's living, dynamic faith. And it amazed Jesus. The centurion here is just such an example for us. I mean, he didn't selfishly ask Jesus to do something for him or his family, but instead to heal one of his servants whom he loved. He wasn't thinking about his own needs, but the needs of others. You see, when you're consumed only with what you want or what you think you need, it can lead to extreme selfishness and trouble. But when you're thinking about what other people want and need, and particularly if it relates to Jesus, what a difference that makes. Frank was 70 years old, and his wife, Betty, had just turned 70 that day. They were having a birthday party celebrating it, and Frank wandered in the home library of a friend's house where there was a collection of artifacts from all over the world. And Frank picked one up and rubbed it, and poof, a genie appeared. And she said, because you freed me from the lamp, I will grant you one wish. Frank was pretty selfish. He didn't care much about other people. And he started thinking about his wife, Betty, turning 70, and peeked around the corner and looked at her out in the living room. At age 70, she was getting a little old, a little cranky. He started thinking about how much better it would be to have a younger, nicer wife. So he leaned in and said to the genie, I wish I had a wife that was 30 years younger than me. And the genie said, are you sure? Are you sure? And he said, yes. Poof. Frank was 100 years old. Be careful about becoming consumed only with what you want and praying only for yourself. The prayer, bless me, bless me, bless me, bless me, bless me, may seem harmless, but the danger is it only focuses on your needs and never focuses on somebody else. See, I think sometimes we approach God with an attitude of self-worth and self-confidence that sort of borders on cockiness. Sometimes maybe we even come into the worship assembly that way. We flash him our personal resume and are proud of all of our accomplishments and convince him we're worthy by what we have done and said to receive his attention and acceptance, and we wonder why heaven is silent. The attitude that he honors is what this centurion said. I'm not even worthy to come into your presence. I don't even want to shake your hand, but I know this. I believe, and if you really want to do it, you can do it without even meeting me. And he did. And he did. True story. A few years ago, a group of tourists were visiting a museum in Vienna where Beethoven, the great composer, had spent his last years. And you can see lots of pictures of this online where that museum is. Some of you may have actually been there. And they came to the conservatory where his piano stood, and the guide said, and here is the great master's piano. And a thoughtless young man pushed his way from the edge of the crowd and sat down at the bench and began to poorly play one of Beethoven's sonatas. And he paused and said to the crowd, I suppose there are a whole lot of people like me who want to play Beethoven's piano. And the guide said, sir, not one person had ever tried to do that before. In fact, the great pianist Paderewski was here last summer, and people in his group begged him to sit and play, but his answer was, I'm not worthy to sit at the master's piano. That's humility. That's humility. And when the centurion returned home, he found his servant was healed. When you go to a place of business, you use money as an exchange for goods or service. You may use a credit card, you may use cash, you may use a check. Now you may just put your phone up and have it scanned, but you are using money for your currency. Listen to me. In faith, in Christianity, faith is the only currency accepted by God. And faith amazes Jesus. And unbelief, despite lots of evidence, like the citizens of Nazareth, also amazed Jesus. God doesn't accept logic or reason or good works. Faith is his only currency. Read verse 6 aloud with me, please. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Sometimes you'll encounter somebody that says, well, I'm just not a person of faith. I just don't have any faith. That's a false claim, because everybody expresses faith every single day. When you put a bite of food in your mouth, you're expressing faith in the farmer who produced it and the cook in the restaurant who prepared it. And I saw a story this week about a DoorDash deliverer. Did you see that? A DoorDash deliverer who spit on the meal as he delivered it on the porch, but got caught by the Ring camera. You're producing faith in the person who produced your food, cooked it, and delivered it to you. It takes faith to put something in your body and not think somebody has spat upon it, or that it might hold something that won't kill you. You buckle your seat in an airplane, you are placing faith in the manufacturer of that plane, the skill of that pilot, and most importantly, the law of aerodynamics. When you're driving and you turn green, you are putting your faith in the fact that the opposing light has red, it's not malfunctioning, and that the other driver is not drunk and is paying attention. We all have faith. The only question is, what is the object of your faith? Faith alone is not good enough. Sometimes people say just have faith and everything will turn out okay. That's very poor advice. Faith in faith is worthless. Your faith is only as good as the object of your faith. The people of Nazareth had unbelief or dead faith. They doubted Jesus, so there were no miracles done there. The centurion had dynamic faith, amazing faith, and God rewarded that faith with a miracle, even though he wasn't on site, he wasn't even present. When you face any challenge in life, you either have faith in Jesus or you don't. Doubt sees the obstacles, faith sees the way. Doubt sees the dark of night, faith sees the day. Doubt dreads to take a step, faith soars on high. Doubt questions who believes, and faith answers, I. And that's the kind of faith that amazes Jesus. I'll close by telling you a true story about a preacher who lived up north. It was in the middle of Minnesota, and he needed to cross the frozen Mississippi River. Not knowing the thickness of the ice, he tied his horse to a tree, and he started walking carefully across the ice. When he had walked a little bit across, he got down on his hands and knees and started feeling along to see if he could determine any crack or hear any sound. About that time, he heard a large sound coming toward him from behind that he couldn't see, that he thought might be the ice behind him cracking. But as he looked over his shoulder, he saw a team of horses pulling logs across the same frozen river. And the thickness of the ice had not changed. And he realized he was safe. He jumped to his feet and went and got his horse and rode across the river. This time the river hadn't changed, the thickness of the ice hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed is he had stopped doubting the ice and started trusting it. Whatever you worry or get afraid about because of what you face in life, to have a feeble faith that makes you crawl and doubt God is unbelief. But when you realize that Jesus has gone ahead of you and has crossed the ice victoriously and has paid the price for you on the cross and has paved the way to heaven, you can joyfully and with faith say, I believe in Jesus. And so because I believe in Jesus, I will act on that belief, and I will follow him, and I will follow him all the way to heaven. And when you do that, I can assure you, Jesus is just as amazed today by your faith as he was the Roman centurions.